Kelly Grove. This is my team.
David?
Lunara.
And our data set is pet adoption. And we wanted to understand what prohibits a pet from being adopted, or the likelihood of a dog or an animal not being adopted in a shelter. So we know that certain animals are less likely to be adopted than others. And we want to use a model to predict why an animal wouldn't be adopted, and from that, understand what features contribute to that, and then identify solutions that could help improve the outcome of that animal's chance of being adopted. And some of the things that we want to consider are, or that's in the data set, it's how does an animal come into a shelter? Is it a stray? Is it a surrender animal? What's the condition of the animal when it comes in? Has it been nude or spayed or neutered? So I call this the sad slide because really this is what it's all about, right? The less desirable animals spend the longer time in a shelter, and the longer they're there, the less likely they are to be adopted. And eventually, many of them are euthanized. Out of 6.5 million animals yearly brought to shelters yearly in the United States, 1.5 million are put down. And that's just really sad. And so we want to identify the features that we can improve upon. So our data set is from the Austin, Texas Animal Shelter. And here are some of the features from that. I won't go into all of them, but this is the type of stuff that was in there. So we looked at, it listed the type of dog breeds that were in there. It listed whether an animal initially coming in was intact or if it'd been spayed or neutered. It listed the color of the animal, what type of animal came in, the gender, how the dog's or the animal's appearance, and then the time of year when the animal was brought in, and then finally, was it a surrender or was the animal actually a stray? And what we discovered was 68% of the shelter intakes are strays, and nearly 21% are owner surrender. And then the remaining 10% are public assist, which is animals that have been returned to their owners, or wildlife, or then a very small percentage of animals are brought in to be euthanized. So the full data set had 27 features and 76,951 records. For those of you who like boxes and things like that, you'll see these are all the features in the data set. And this is obviously an outcome, it's a binary classification. We want to understand that an animal has been adopted or not. We were concentrating on animals not being adopted. So true in the matrix in this instance was not adopted. That was a true positive for us.
So we decided to use DataRobot to analyze the data, and we produced 24 different models for us to compare and contrast, and we decided that we were going to basically focus on the area under the curve because we're not worried about the payoff of this situation. We're more focused on the humanitarian effort of helping these animals. So DataRobot produced the best model for us was the gradient boosted trees. It basically had the best area under the curve. It was the most accurate as well. It has the best log loss. So it had a lot of good indications where we were going to be comfortable using this model moving forward. And this is just a demonstration of what the model was actually doing for us, how it was going to take the data, analyze it, compare it, and try to see what's the weaker predictions, what's stronger comparisons, and eventually give us the most accurate prediction we were hoping for. So, and then the model produced some of these important features that we decided that we were going to look at these specifically. One of them was wherever the animal was fixed. The other one was the condition of the animal coming into the shelter, the date of time the animal would come to the shelter and when they would get adopted, as well as the color of the animal. So for the fixed outcome, we were looking at animals that were fixed versus non-fixed. And the data shows overwhelmingly that animals that are fixed have a way better chance of being adopted as opposed to animals that are not fixed. If your animal is not fixed, the likelihood of adoption is 99%. in some cases, as if they're also unknown animals, which these tend to be the ones who are, you don't know the condition, they come out and people don't know if they're fixed or not, and people don't want to take a risk with an animal that's not fixed. They rather know what the animal is, fixed or not fixed. Then you have animals that are intake, which is again, you have animals that are just not fixed. They remain to be, they need to be fixed and improves the odds of the animal. Next slide. Then the intake type, which is the animals that are wildlife or animals that are surrendered, animals that were unfortunately, some animals do go to a shelter with a request to be euthanized. And these animals have a very low chance of being adopted. So then we looked at the days of the month, and we looked at the months in the year, and we figured that there's times when the adoption rates will be higher than others. Typically, unadoption rates are lower when it's in July and December, and in terms of the days of the week, typically animals have a better chance of being adopted during the weekends compared to the weekday. Then we also looked at the animal's colors, and based on this, if your animal is brown, they have a higher chance of not being adopted compared to other animals. And likewise, if your animal happens to be white, they have better chances of being adopted.
So what's the big payoff on all this? What do we want to do with this information? Well, so taking the data and coming up with actionable insights from it, the first thing we learned is spay and neuter every animal that comes to the shelter. That's a critical step that a shelter can take to better the outcome that an animal will be adopted. In addition, strays are less likely to be adopted. They come with a little bit more baggage. They might have trouble socializing. Animals that are surrendered by a family tend to get adopted more. So do things, address strays, provide extended care, whether that be a foster service, additional medical attention, or some extra grooming. Likewise, so with the situation of color, find a creative way to highlight the black or the brown animals, mix them up with different groupings, display their photos. When you tell a story or testimonials, use the colors of those animals to help tell that story. And then finally, we know that there's seasonality in the data, meaning that we know there are certain times of the year where animals are more likely to not be adopted. So we know, like April just passed, April is Animal Shelter Awareness Month, which makes sense from what we found in our data because animals are least likely to be adopted in April and May. And so there's a push nationally to get the awareness out about adoption. Likewise, I did some research and the local shelter here does a Valentine's Day promotion called Meet Your Match or something like that. And so it's very clever. And again, they're capitalizing on times of the year to take advantage to promote awareness of animal adoption. So with that, if anybody has questions, Melanie. Thank you. I'm in marketing, so even if they said nothing, they'll look pretty.
But they also said something.
Yes. That was teamwork.
Plus, it helps when you have animals to show. So.
Yeah, you know.
Any other questions?
I mean, I was thinking bring my dog.
Yeah, that would be great.
I don't know if you know anything about this, but how does wildlife end up in shelter? Should wildlife go back to the wild? Right, so
Well, in our data set, I believe only 5% of the animals were either non-dogs or cats. So what you have in that situation, sometimes they'll send it to a shelter and there'll just be a holding period before they relocate the animal to maybe a zoo or something like that if it's a bird, for example. Other times they do find people who want to adopt birds. That's usually one of the reasons, because sometimes birds are injured and no longer can fly and need aid. So sometimes they'll either be like, well, we can't go in the zoo because this animal is not really a prominent bird, but maybe if someone wants to take care of a bird, they can adopt one in an animal shelter.
Wow, so we've heard from no-shows, bad cars, people with winding up in the hospital with diabetes, pets not being adopted, and now we're moving to homicides. Can it get any better?
That's our life.